All right, so first of all, what an incredible audience on a Thursday afternoon in the middle of the day. Pretty fantastic. Thank you so much for coming out. And so I thought maybe just to get started, I'd love to get an idea of people who've come out, their relationship to the pools. So maybe with a show of hands, you can just raise your hand to say if you've ever been to one of the Montclair pools. Yes, all right. And how about one more show of hands if you happen to be living in Montclair when those pools were constructed or came about? All right. Oh, great, great, wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I hope we'll hear from you all later at the end. We're going to get right into that. Here we go. Here we go. So thank you so much for coming to share about this. I've been curious about these things since I moved to Montclair 20-something years ago. So our panelists, two of our panelists anyway, were living and working in Montclair during this whole process. So eager to hear your insights. At the time, there were no outdoor public pools in Montclair, right, in the 1970s. So can you just give us some understanding of what made the town decide to provide public pools in the first place? Maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Brandon.
I just want to inform everyone that I am not Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles. But I just recently had cataract surgery, and the bright lights irritate me. So, but yeah, I was very active when the pools were constructed. And that was probably around 1968 or so when they began discussions about that. And one of the things I wanted to point out today that this whole idea of integrating the pools is a misnomer, because that's why we ended up with 3 pools, because a lot of the white people in town did not want to swim with black people. So that's why we have 3 pools today. And it was, very expensive to operate 3 pools. You needed 3 times the staff and 3 times the amount of water, and the whole 9 yards. So, but the pools, when I was in college, I guess, is when they actually began the discussions about building the pools. And me and a few of my friends, we went to a council meeting, or it wasn't a council at the time, it was a commission. And we went to the commission meeting and tried to talk them into building 1 pool as opposed to the 3 that we ended up with. So I will pass the mic and let someone else offer something, and I'll get back to you.
Sure, Mr. Terry, yeah, if you could pick up from there, and if you have any insight onto what even was going on that made the township start to talk about creating a public pool.
Oh, well, you figure in very difficult times in the 60s, we actually, when the process was first discussed, we were in either high school or middle school at that time. And that goes back, we're, I guess, the OGs right now of the region. But you figure 63, you had the president killed. We were 8th grade at that time. 64 was the Civil Rights Act was passed then. Then the discussion of the pool started between 1964 and 1965 by 4 commissioners altogether. Matthew Carter was a commissioner at that time. He later became the first African-American mayor of the township of Montclair. he was one of the individuals who did want the one pool. He was going for that, and he stated, along with the NAACP at that time, they knew in order to integrate everybody to have one pool, but he was only one voice against three other voices at that time. You think the times were, again, as I indicated, very difficult. You had the riots in 1967, which affected this area. And you had actually Martin Luther King killed in 1968, along with Malcolm X, along with the Vietnam War. So there was a lot going on at that time. But there were some changes, thankfully, moving forward in Montclair. Now, I must say that eventually, the people in South End kind of wanted the three pools because they wanted a pool in Nishuane that was close to their homes there, so their children didn't have to go all the way uptown, the middle of town, which they were looking at maybe
That
in
was where, if there
that
was going to be
area.
one, the proposal, it would be in the middle of town.
That is correct. Probably, if I'm not mistaken, Lonnie, somewhere in the Woodman Field area.
Essex Park.
Yeah, Essex Park there. So, there was a compromise eventually for that.
Thank you. Yeah, we forget just how many important historical things were happening, and our proximity to Newark, where the Newark Rebellion was taking place in the late 60s, absolutely. So another thing I was interested in, and maybe Angelica, you could speak to this, is just this idea of pools historically, public pools historically, because it sounds like this was a time when public pools were starting to happen. Can you give us the historical context for that? And if you could also talk a little bit about one central pool versus this neighborhood pool model, if you can put that in a historical context.
Sure. I think there's a couple things at play in Montclair. So prior to any of the neighborhood pools, Montclair had no public pool in the community. Where there were pools were at private country clubs or beach clubs of sorts, which were exclusive, and then also at neighborhood YMCAs and YWCAs, you could access pools. In Montclair, those spaces were segregated at that time. Prior, there was integration that was going on at the YWCAs in the 1950s, but I'm sure anyone who was part of those organizations know that that took quite some time for that to be fully realized. So prior to that, where you were swimming depended on race, what you could access and what you could not. That goes back, I think a lot of people in this room historically already know, with redlining in Montclair. That is still very apparent with how our neighborhoods today are still set up. And I'm going to throw a lot of information I kept thinking about out here, because also at the same time, the pool discussion, and I was chatting with Lonnie and Roger about this, Montclair's magnet school system was being developed to get away from the neighborhood schooling, which is quite the opposite of the initiative of the neighborhood pools that were instituted almost at exactly the same time, within a couple of years of each other. So it's very interesting, the pieces at play to get to that public pool model. And I think everyone already mentioned the 1964 Civil Rights Act was really the catalyst to begin those conversations about the lack of public recreation for people in Montclair. As I said, really was only exclusive club access, or perhaps through YWCAs at the time, or YMCAs that you would have access to. So that sort of puts the context of also what was happening in Montclair for us too.
And you brought up the word redlining, which I was thinking of, and maybe other people were, but can you just give us the definition?
Yes.
So we're all clear? I'm sure many people have heard of it, but
Right.
nice to be.
So redlining was very much something occurring in the 1930s through home loan and mortgage companies, which would grade neighborhood areas from basically red to green with very descriptive context. You can actually look, after this program, we can easily email this to the group. If you're really fascinated to learn about how Montclair was described by neighborhoods in the 1930s, to give access to loans or to promote development, redevelopment, completely knocking buildings down or rebuilding communities. It was used as a plan to actually help and promote segregation of spaces. And to keep people in certain neighborhoods. So Montclair completely was impacted by that initiative. You still see it today. I was actually looking up the statistics of the redlining maps comparatively today. Some things have changed, but it almost looks like you're reading a map still from 1930 if you look at our demographics in Montclair when you think of 07042 versus 07043 zip codes. It's a very interesting exercise. And also very deliberate in the descriptions, talks about cultural and African-American infiltration of neighborhoods is actually how it's written in the redlining descriptions. So there were very, very clear actions with what that did to communities, and we still see the results of it right here in Montclair. Yeah.
Okay, so, goodness, wasn't expecting that part of it today. In the introduction, Ariel talked about Heather McGhee's book, and the three-pool system is an example of her idea of this drained pool policy that she describes in that community read, The Sum of Us, and which, she talks about as negative for everyone. So I would love to hear just a little bit more from our people who were residents here and also involved in this process, just some more details about this decision to do 3 pools. And was there discussion about financially how that would impact folks?
That conversation predated my tenure with the township, so I wasn't involved in any of those discussions. But, as, 20-something people, because it was, like I said, I was around close to 20 years old, and I had some kids. But I was concerned that 3 pools were going to be a drain on the economics of the township. You needed 3 times the number of lifeguards, 3 times the amount of chemicals, and the whole 9 yards. So it was very, emotional for a lot of us. And me and 3 or 4 of my friends, we went to a commission meeting and had a real rough time trying to convince the commissioners to, see our arguments and to understand that we were concerned with the finances in the township, and we weren't, we couldn't even vote at that time. No, the voting age was 21. So our arguments fell upon deaf ears because there was nothing that we could say or do that would convince the powers that be that we had some very mature insight as to what we should be doing as a community. So
I'm curious what their reasoning was for 3 pools. I'm sure they didn't come right out and say. Just curious if you remember what their arguments were.
Well, they kept talking about neighborhoods, but you had to understand that the neighborhoods, there were no black people north of Watchung Avenue at that time. And over by Essex Park, the Forest Street area, that was fairly integrated. There were a large population of Italian residents in that area, and there were quite a few African Americans there. And then at the south end of town, that was almost 90% African American at that time. So that's why the concept of the neighborhood pools was very attractive to the people who did not want to have the races mix in water.
Yeah.
We had a playground system in Montclair for many, many years. When we grew up, you went to a neighborhood school. For me, I lived on North Fullerton Avenue, right down the street. So I went to Rand School, which is or not Rand School anymore, but it was Rand School back in the day. And that was a mix of all kinds of people. You know, there were some Irish, some Italians, blacks, Jews that went to Rand School, but predominantly black in that area. You had Watchung, you know, which was predominantly white. Edgemont was predominantly white. Bradford was predominantly white. Northeast was, Grove Street was a mixture also. And I see some of the people here from Grove Street. They went to school there. And Nishuane. The good part about it was that on the summers, when you were out of school, the Recreation and Parks Department had a lot for you to do in these playground areas. You didn't have to pay anything to go to the playground. They had activities for you, they had sports and everything for you like that. So I imagine that they thought that that was a good idea. They figured like, oh, well, you know, we have these people in these different areas, you know, let's put the pools in there. Like maybe, I'm just thinking, maybe that was part of their thinking in doing that, you know. But again, as Lonnie spoke, you know, talked about that it should have been just one pool as mayor, you know, wanted at that time. But.
And then, of course, the consequences are that you end up with segregated pools.
Yeah.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about the efforts to, once that happened, desegregate the pools?
Well, one of the things that we did in the rec department was to have competitions, swim competitions between the three pools. And that gave us an opportunity to have the people who frequented one pool travel to another area in town, you know, and they would have an opportunity to observe what the conditions were at those pools. And, you know, there was always a perception that Mountainside Pool had more resources than the other two pools, which really wasn't necessarily true. That was pretty well administered by the professional staff in the rec department. But, you know, those are some of the conversations that were going on. There was always a perception that Mountainside was a lot better. And in fact, we ended up with a few African-American families that would go to Mountainside Pool, and they would travel, you know, from the south end of town up to Mountainside because they thought that it was going to be better, you know. And then once they got there, they found out that it was basically the same as what they had left, and they had gotten in their cars and driven 15 minutes, you know, to for naught. So, did I answer your question?
Yes, no, yeah, absolutely. I was just, yeah, interested in hearing any ways that that began. If you have any insights either.
Oh, nothing further. That only that when Mr. Brandon took over the Recreation and Parks Department, he did a great job. How many people did you have working for you at that time?
Well, we had a full-time staff of about 40 people.
Yeah.
And then our part-time and summer employees easily tripled what we had as a full-time staff, because we hired lots of young people for various jobs, so, including lifeguards.
See, the commitment to the community is a lot bigger than when you think about like how many people committed towards, helping from the Recreation and Parks Department, helping the young people in the community. So that was good. And there was a lot of help, and thank God that he was in charge of them, and made sure that everything was fair, at least back then, where people, as he indicated, thought maybe some of the other pools were better. They were equally distributed, and all of our children actually swim in these pools. Mine mostly in Essex, because, we lived right in that area there.
Now I'm wondering, how big is our park department now? I don't know. Does anybody know? Maybe someone will tell us. Maybe you know.
I don't know. I really don't. Kind of baffled by some of the rumors that I hear about what's transpired here in town over the last few years. But I know they've cut quite a few staff. As I said, we used to hire young people just to give them a few dollars, and they weren't making careers out of it. Actually, I ended up making a career out of the rec department. I started my career there running centers and umpiring baseball games. And during the summer of 1972, I was manager at Nishawane Pool. And I was off on the weekend, and I went to work on Monday morning, and I had a note there that I needed to call the commissioner. He wanted to see me. So I started to chew out my staff because I couldn't figure out what the hell they had done the day before because I wasn't there. And I get up to the rec office, and make a long story short, I was offered a full-time job as an activities director, and that really kind of, spurred my career on, because I started a family at a very young age, and I was just graduating from college and didn't have a full-time job and had no idea what I was actually going to do. And when they offered me the job, I said, I can do that, So I started working there in December of 1973, and ended up 35 years working for the township.
One time it's good to get called in by the boss.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that made me wonder, because you brought up baseball in that story, and so it's making me wonder about the, rec leagues that start and how this model of having the neighborhood pools, if that also affected things like Little League and our rec leagues. Were they also separated and segregated, or were they integrated?
Well, there was a guy, his name was Ray Warner, who actually encouraged the township or the town at the time, to integrate the baseball program, because all of the baseball teams in town the tryouts were held locally. So the kids who went to tryouts at Mountainside Park made teams that only played their games at Mountainside unless they had to travel, to around town to another location. But those teams were all white. The central part of town, where Roger grew up, those teams were, fairly integrated. And then the teams at the south end of town were almost 99% black. So that was, the whole town was, operated under that banner, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I can't remember who brought up earlier the idea of the magnet school system, but, hearing the 3 pools also makes me think of that. And I think it was happening, this idea, at the same time. So I'm curious if you have any insights into how this 3-pool system would end up in separate, pools where people were segregated, but at the same time, this idea of the magnet pool was a way to bring people together and desegregate.
And my daughter was one of the first students to be affected by the magnet program. And she was born in 1969, so that would have been around 1974 or so when she started school. And what they did was they took programs that they thought would appeal to white people and put them in schools that were basically located in black neighborhoods, knowing that a certain number of people would not want to bus their kids. So they thought that would, really, achieve that whole integration piece. And that was, that's how the magnet program started. My kids, I was looking for, the 3 R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I sent them to the north end of town to school. And there were always going to be, a certain number of people who lived in various neighborhoods who didn't want to take advantage of busing. But busing was optional, only if you needed it. So that was, that was how the magnet system was supposed to integrate our schools, as an integration program.
Well, it was a big fight over that also. There were a lot of people that didn't want their kids bussed out of the neighborhood. That changed a lot of people's thoughts about where my kid is going to be. One of my friends in the crowd right now, he was bused from, should have went to Glenfield, actually closed Glenfield School back in those days. Glenfield at one point was an elementary school and a middle school. And if I'm not mistaken, it just became an elementary school at that time, right?
Right.
And they bused people from that area, the Glenfield, like the 4th Ward, up to Mount Hebron. So to a lot of people, I hope they talk about it, anybody that went to Mount Hebron back then, what a shock that was, going from your neighborhood school to Mount Hebron, that you basically, well, it's Buzz Aldrin now, have never even walked around up in that area. It's funny, Lonnie and I were talking a little bit earlier about, we haven't been in the library in a long time, and we talked about the Bellevue Avenue Library, and in my life, I've probably only been in that building maybe about 3 or 4 times,
Yeah, it is. People are always so interested when people who are not from here, give them the lay of the land and look at me kind of curiously like, what? You have 2 of this and 3 of that? And yeah, so, but, always, because I think we all can agree it's not the most economical place to live. So I'm always wondering about the money. And so I'm wondering if you can remember what their projected costs were for those pools and how people responded to that back then, or even ballpark, maybe. Maybe I should have looked this up.
I don't, as I said, most of that stuff predated me. Now, I was working for Parks and Rec at some point, during the operation of those 3 pools. And most of the time, the budgets were pretty equal. It's not like one was, out of whack and, somebody else was paying the freight. But it was, they were extremely expensive to operate.
And I can imagine to construct as well, like 3 as opposed to
Well,
1.
And during my tenure in the rec department, I saw all 3 pools renovated and reconstructed, because they only lasted about maybe 10 years or so, and then we had to do capital projects to restore them. And we were very fortunate because at that point in time, the state had Green Acres funds available, and we renovated the pools with Green Acres funds.
Oh, go ahead, Angel.
Actually,
Yeah.
so I actually would like Lonnie and Roger to tell me if I have this information right. So in 1968, which sounds like predates you both a little bit, is when the Community Pool Association Committee began the conversations. And it sounds like they actually had 4 temporary pool locations, which included Mountainside Park, Essex, Nishawane, and then also Glenfield. That was correct. Right, and then it wasn't actually until above ground,
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, and then it wasn't until closer to 1974, exact same time the magnet school system is happening, that the final decision was made to implement only 3 of those permanently. I was just curious, does anyone recall anything what happened with Glenfield and this decision?
Glenfield fell victim to vandalism. It was an above-ground pool and had a rubber liner. And somebody got in there and cut the liner and drained it. I don't know if Donald Trump was involved in that or not, but that's what happened. Somebody got involved, got in at night. They went in and cut the pool, and the next morning, the staff showed up to work, and the pool was empty.
Yeah.
And then I guess just fiscally it wasn't feasible to replace.
It didn't make sense to replace that pool because it was only about 3 or 4 blocks from Nishawane Pool. So it really didn't make sense to make another investment.
One bad apple. I see Ariel here, so I think it's time to open up to our audience.
So I was around then, and I remember a lot of the stuff that you talk about. But I thought, Lonnie, one really interesting thing you said was that, Mountainside Pool was pretty much the same as Nishawane Pool, but people thought it was better. So that's like a racial component just there and like the expectations. But that to me was so, like, why did people, and I grew up in Middletown around Essex Pool. Why did people think Mountainside was better, sight unseen, even though it really was the same? That's fascinating to me.
And my view is very simple. Is that above Watchung Avenue, it's Upper Montclair. And everybody thought, ooh, Upper Montclair, it's better, it's separate, it has its own post office, its own zip code. And like you said, black folks weren't allowed above there to live. So that's why, in my opinion, they thought Mountainside was the better pool.
Thank you. And if you could let us know your name when you come up, I would love to know who you are.
My name is Barry Brandon, and Lonnie has the privilege of being my brother.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
I am Tiffany Miss Montclair Booker, and yes, it took me forever to get MissMontclair.com. So I have a different perspective as to why some people thought that Mountainside was better. I would say in the very late 90s, Mom, there was a point where they got, I think, umbrellas, right, for shade before the other pools. And I remember asking my mom, well, how come we don't have umbrellas and kind of chase lounge chairs? And my mom kind of checked in about that, and then later, Nishwain received it, and I guess Essex. So that was part of why I thought that that was a better pool. That was just my experience.
Thank you.
In 2015, you, Lonnie, spoke to my son, Will Zaubler, who was a student at MKA, and wrote a paper on the desegregating, or the segregated swimming pools, which I just wanted to share with all of you. He would kill me if he knew I was here. I was late because I tried to come on Zoom because I really didn't want to make a big production, but it didn't work. So I drove over to share this with you.
Oh, wow.
I just want to say that's in the archives at the Montclair History Center, and I've referred to it. It's a wonderful resource he put together. And Lonnie, you're quoted in it.
All right, he spoke to you, and he spoke to another lady who may not be with us anymore because she was very elderly. Oh, God, sorry. She was very elderly. She wore a beret, and she said that she would never, ever walk into the Park Street Y because of the history of the segregated Ys. Oh, gosh. So anyhow, it's all there.
I think that might have been Mrs. Sandra Lang. Ms.
Yes,
Sandra
that's
Lang.
who it was. Yes. Is she still around?
She has passed.
Yeah, she was very elderly, and this was like 11 years ago. Anyhow, you know, his theory, and then again, I missed the first half, but his theory is it's pure racism. Like, swimming was a place that was considered historically dangerous. I don't know if you got into that earlier, but that's why he thought there was a discrepancy between the schools, which I did come in as you were asking that question, and the pools, and that probably is structurally true. So anyhow.
That actually was one thing that I was wanting you to speak to a little bit, Angelica, is the pool history. But go ahead. No, go ahead.
No,
Whatever
I
you're
was
gonna-
just going to thank her for this publication.
Thank you for talking
Yep.
to my son.
Yeah, awesome. And then we'll come right back to you, Jerry. If you could just say just a minute about that history.
You know, I think part of, at least what I've read is, I don't know I have the answer. You know, I think part of that lives privately what the discussions were going on with the commission at the time that led to the final decision. I don't think I don't have that. You know, I'm wondering what these two individuals up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking also, this is beyond just Montclair. I mean, there was a long history of division, keeping people separate when it came to swimming spaces.
Be of no surprise that that was part of it.
I mean,
I just wanted to mention that at the time, from 64 to 68, Jerome C. L. Jackson was the mayor, and Robert Ferris III, who was a former mayor, was one of the commissioners. George Segal was a commissioner, and Fred G. Topping, along with Matthew Carter. Those were the people. So the form of government we have now is completely different than it was back in those days also.
Yeah, hi, it's Jerry Freed. Fascinating discussion. I wanted to ask a question about not so much the topography, but the shape of Montclair. It's very challenging for transportation for efficiency. We're about a mile wide and 6 miles long. That's obviously no excuse for segregation or anything else, but a combination of that shape of the township and obviously the breaking up of towns to be more racially homogeneous. Montclair is one of those rare towns that has some diversity because a little bit of the shape. So anyway, so the question is really a little bit about what transportation might have been like. Lonnie, you talked about getting in a car and driving, and the way Montclair, the way transportation works really is a lot about the town, because the train coming through, not going through 1 mile, but having to go diagonally through because of the rocks, and the township historian let me know about that. So I'm just kind of curious about that. Modes of transportation back then, obviously people walking to a pool is one thing. Getting in a car to have to drive a mile or a mile and a half to go to a pool changes things. But just the way that the shape of the town and the way racial distribution works with, basically the south part of the town, African American and very white as you get further north.
Well, I have an experience that I had when I was in 9th grade. They were integrating the baseball program in town, and because we tried out in our in our local neighborhoods, I was sent from the south end of town to Mountainside Park. I was the only black guy that went to Mountainside Park. I integrated the team there. So it was, I had no idea where Mountainside Park was. And somebody told me it was on Upper Mountain Avenue, so I found Upper Mountain Avenue and I started walking. And it seemed like it took me 3 days to walk up to Mountainside Park, but that was, that's what we had to do, the township was, like you said, it's only a mile wide or so and 6 miles long, So it's a challenge getting from the south end of town to the north end of town.
And a lot of people rode their bikes back. More
Yeah.
people, most of the kids rode their bikes back in those days, There were bike shops around town. There were some in people's garages that worked on different people's bikes. So all of us, rode bikes in those days, or either walked. Your parents, if they had a car, they only had one car, so, and they needed that for work. So there was no way that they were going to pick you up and take you to any other place. You were going to get there however that you wanted, and most of the kids, that's what they did.
That's great, thank you. The last thing I just want to say, south end, the middle part of town, there's a lot of apartment buildings. Most people don't know, and every time I talk in a public place, I let people know that Montclair is north of 40% renters. Most people are single-family homeowners, have no idea. And the rental housing, relative to the rest of the housing, is fairly well integrated. And even though it's more expensive to rent in Montclair, a lot of the diversity in Montclair really comes from the fact that at the time it was developed, it was a tight street grid with very small blocks and a lot of high-density apartment buildings, and that's why it is this sort of city meets the suburb type of place it is. So.
Thank you, Jerry.
Hi, I'm Elsie Barrick, and I am a little bit older than the guys on. The reason why I wanted to speak to you all is the concept of Montclair. I didn't realize it until late that Montclair really was established by those people who were wealthy and moved out to the suburbs, and they hired servants. Those of us who went to the Montclair schools, we went to school with the children of servants and the children of the employers. So it meant that we all, probably didn't happen till the high school, but we all went to school together. And so that's why we know that money doesn't make you smart or beautiful or clever, but it also doesn't make you dumb. But with that, when we're talking about the segregation and the looking at the community and whatever, much of it is neighborhood schools, I would say. My grandfather bought his first house in 1914. And so we have an established way of living. The segregation, I'll say it out loud, we had the black, white, and wealthy communities. But we all live together. And so when our children go to school, they are comfortable meeting people of different experiences, let's say. As far as the services are concerned, I think unfortunately, many of us realize that our school books at Glenfield, which is where I went to, were not the same quality as some of the books in some other areas, but that's a different discussion altogether. I have lived in Montclair many, many years, and born in Montclair. My mother was born in Montclair, and I will tell you that when you see us get together and we find out that we're both from Montclair, don't we get on your nerves? When'd you go to Montclair High? You know, and that kind of a thing. So I thank you, and I do love Montclair and people who are moving in. I hope that you will understand why we feel the way we do. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I saw other hands up.
If I may say, with Mrs. Barrett there, my dad and mom went to Montclair High School also. My dad graduated in 1938, and my mom in 1940. And my grandparents came here probably in the early 1900s, somewhere there. My grandfather was a janitor for Montclair Normal School, which is Montclair State University right now. And my father was born in the house right at 114 North Fullerton Avenue.
Hello, my name is Chanel. You said that one of the pools, the reason why it didn't come to fruition was because it was drained, and they figured that maybe we didn't need it because there was another one in the neighborhood. And the thought came to me, well, if that happened to the white pool, would they be like, well, maybe we don't need this, let's just be one short of a pool. And then when people are talking about the pools being different, I'm thinking, and you're saying that the pools were the same, but maybe it's also the surrounding area. You know, when you go to an area and you see, I don't know, I'm asking this, and you see houses that are more spread out, and it just, even if that pool is the same, it just has a different feeling because you're just in a different space, and you want to, you know, maybe experience that as well. And I just want to learn more about, because it's just so, it seems so complicated, and I mean, complicated that the schools seemed integrated from what I'm hearing. The schools were integrated. The pools were segregated, but yet you went to school with everybody and that was integrated. And then this conversation that we're having is just about, you know, the schools being, you know, you just couldn't go to those schools, but it's like one of the deeper problems is that the redlining, and that you couldn't even live in those areas if you wanted to go to those schools. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. And if you tried to go to those those pools, what would happen? If you're black and you go to that pool, I know that, you know, maybe they didn't have the signs that said white only and you were escorted a different way, but what did that look like if you actually tried to go? Would you say that you can't go there because you don't live in this area and it's just this big cycle because you don't live in this area because the government won't let you live in this area because it's redlining? What does that look like?
For the most part, I would say anybody who went to a swimming pool, they weren't asked to leave, they weren't harassed, but they did get a lot of strange looks. And people would, you know, if somebody, you know, lost a wallet or what have you, the first people that they would look at would be the people who they didn't think were from their community. Hi, Deborah.
I would say, you know, this is not my experience, but what I've heard in other oral histories or I've read about from residents is polite racism. of what is occurring after things like the Civil Rights Act. That's a common theme I've heard from long-timers of the community, or this perception of unwelcomeness to not go somewhere, and then by default you do not go. Again, these are not my experiences, and again, if anyone here in the audience has those experiences, please share them. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
My name is Joyce Booker, and I was a student at Glenfield when the desegregation came about and had to go to Mount Hebron. And I immediately noticed the difference in our textbooks. We had the battered up textbooks with 6 or 7 names ahead of us, before we got our books. And then when you went to Mount Hebron, brand new books. Top of the line, same, different subjects, but it was a big difference. So we noticed that, and that might be why we didn't go over to the Bellevue Library, because we figured, well, maybe they're doing the same thing there, and it was kind of disheartening. So I just wanted to share that perspective with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I experienced something very similar, Joyce. When I went to Hillside School for 10 years, from kindergarten through 9th grade. And when I was at Hillside, I got books that had been used already. And I learned a little bit later that some of those names that I saw in those books were people that I ended up playing football with at Montclair High School. I remember I got a book, Garvey Craw. I remembered his name, and I ended up meeting him when I went to high school. But he was a couple years ahead of me in school. But, his books, they came from Mount Hebron School down to Hillside.
Yeah, same thing at Rand. Rand was the same way. Rand, if there were 450 kids in the school, 400 were African American. So, yeah, we got the hand-me-downs all the time. But it wasn't, as Elsie stated, until I got to George Ennis, that the other schools blended there. And you met all of the kids from all over. And of course, when you got to the high school, you met them all there also.
Hi, my name is Deborah. I'm 75 years old. I've lived in Montclair for 75 years. My grandparents came here in the late 1800s. The Y on Park Street, they did not want us there. They had a Y, which is now, I don't know what the school is now, Clifford or something, Bullock, on Washington. They had the men's Y there, tore that down. Where the new Y is on Glen Ridge Avenue. In the back was the women's Y. That's where I took ballet classes from. The Crane House used to sit on that property. It was empty. Between dance classes, I and other people would run in and out of the house. It was open. There wasn't any vagrancy, so it wasn't any problem or being unsafe. But that house used to be the home that when black women came up here from the South and they had to find somewhere to live, that's where they lived. Valley Road, there was a place called Bonds. They didn't want us there. Bloomfield Avenue, Grunnings. Grunnings was almost next to where the Claridge, the front of the Claridge is. They didn't want us there. I sat there at least 20 minutes before someone came and took my order. And just a little lighter thing, where the train station is, the train used to actually come there, and you would go where there's that restaurant there now. I don't know what kind of, you'd go in there, get your ticket, put your luggage in there, pick up the train, and it would take you to New York. So that's my story. And I know these two. Lonnie's sister is my best friend, who's his wife, who I was in his wedding.
Hi, I have a question and also a couple of, what? Oh, I'm Emily Filardo. I've been living in Montclair since '99. So I have a question, which may have been answered at the beginning. I walked in 10 minutes late. I understand there's some oral histories that have been done about all this, so maybe this was already mentioned. I'm so interested in what was going on in terms of the movements of people in town around all these issues. Like, I'm imagining that there were Black community groups that were organizing around these debates about the pools. There might have been white residents who were involved, some of them opposing, some of them perhaps in coalition. And I'd love to hear more about that if you have that, or if not, maybe it's in the oral histories of who was involved, what did they demand, how did they work together, what the conflicts were, because that's always interesting, how stuff happens, you know, from that ground level. But the sort of anecdotes I will share is that my kid was born in '99, so when they were maybe somewhere 7, 8, 9, I'm not sure that age, so we're talking about their mid-2000s, I remember that the parents of some of my kids' white friends saying they wanted to go to Mountainside. They didn't want to go to Nishuet, and I asked why. And this is not going to be surprising, I'm sure, to the African-American people here, but maybe it's useful information to think about for the rest of us. This one parent said, well, you know, at Nishuet, I'm sorry this is painful, at Nishuet, you know, so many of the kids there, they're kind of unsupervised and they act a little wild, you know. So, you know, I told her I'd never seen that, I didn't agree, but I didn't really pursue it anymore, which I wish I had. The other thing I'll say is that I'm so grateful that my white kid had never had a principal at any school they went to who wasn't Black, which I think was good for them. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you either want to respond to, I forgot your name, I'm sorry, your question? Emily, thank you. About movements or groups that were organizing at that time?
Well, I know that the NAACP was involved. I'm sure that probably Dr. Baskerville's parents, probably down in Nishuet, they were very active at that time, because I did read where there were a group of people from Nishuet that were behind Mayor Carter in helping him out. I would think also Mr. Richardson and a few of the other people, there were a group of people, Wally Choice, you know, some of the people there that were involved also. Some of the other groups I don't know, but I know the same people that were active, you know, we've seen throughout our lives, you know, that were active back then. That's.
So, just a couple of things. So one is I wanted to say that also in Isabel Wilkerson's cast, there's a conversation, one of her pillars of racism is about purity and pollution, and she connects it to water, and she talks about this idea of the drained pool. And I think I'm gonna try to send some, you know, a bibliography or some resources about things that have happened in the past to everybody who registered. So if you didn't register, give us your email address so we can send that to you. And then I also, I wanted to bring this back to the idea of the drained pool politics, because one thing that somehow didn't come up in the discussion is I was talking to Lonnie before the program, and he said that, I said, so the drained pool politics here is that everybody in Montclair was paid more money to have these pools constructed, and we're continuing to pay more money to staff them and maintain them. And he said that there was another element to it too, which is that we didn't get a pool that was large enough for the older kids to dive. So we actually never got a pool that was the equal of a community like Princeton, which has one big gorgeous pool. And then I also you know, in my capacity as a resident, I moved here in 2003 and raised my daughter here. And I remember we lived on Gates Avenue in the apartment, so we were pretty close to Nishwain. And we just assumed we'd go to Nishwain. And I remember one of our neighbors who had lived in Montclair for a long time saying, you don't want your little white daughter, your little blonde white daughter to go to Nishwain. And us being like, wow, that is just straight up racist. And I don't know that we confronted him about it because that would have been really awkward, but we just ignored it. Anyway, so that's what I have to share. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bertha Andre, and I'm from Haiti. And we're speaking about, segregation, desegregation, kind of racism. So you can imagine what we are going through. And thank you. Yeah, so I do a lot of research too, because when my child, being victimized, of those kind of segregation and ourselves. So I do a lot of research, and I think education is really the key to it, because what has been happening, years before, and those things still happening right now in Montclair, everywhere. And so I would like to ask you what you think is the best, approach to help to solve this problem, because there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering with those things. Because you can see the water, you would like to go there, but you already know you're not welcome there. So it's not easy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you were looking for some response, right?
Yeah.
So.
What was that in reference to? Say that again.
To, the real, if I understood you correctly, just the real pain that comes from that kind of segregation when you can see something, right in front of you, but you aren't allowed to use it.
If I may mention, I still live in Montclair. I've been in the house that I'm in now for 50 years. I think it's one of the best places on the planet to live. Not just Montclair, but Essex County and the surrounding towns around here. You have an opportunity to have all kinds of people, at least that you have a chance here, And in Montclair, even though there were some difficulties, that at least you knew that you may have a chance. It's always been like that, As I stated a little bit earlier, my parents went to Montclair High School. It was difficult back then. My father, just tell one quick story. He went down to Tuskegee. He was an airman down there. And when he came back home, he had his wings on his lapel, and one of the guys he went to high school with saw him with the wings. He said, Al, what are you doing with those wings, on your lapel? He said, don't you know black people can't fly? He didn't even know that there was such a thing as Tuskegee Airmen, So, it always has been a little bit of issue, but they at least knew each other. You knew each other, where in some places, like when I came on the police department in 1973, there were individuals from all over the state, and some of those officers have never been around African Americans. So, only what they saw on either TV or that they read someplace is what they knew about black people.
I'll share. Actually, Roger, you said this before. We were sitting outside before the program that if to try and help with change is to just get involved in your community, groups, committees, if you can. That's easier said than done. And then I appreciate what you brought up about education. I think you know, at the History Center, one thing that's really important to us is to make sure your stories are told. You know, come give us a call. Let's do an oral history. You know, if your story's not being captured, then it's not part of the history of the community. You know, we want people to hear those stories. So, and I know that's sometimes people feel modest about it, but whatever we can do to make more of the stories told, we're here to help do that. We've done oral histories with both of these gentlemen sitting up here on the stage, and we're so grateful, you know, because otherwise that information wouldn't be there. So reflect on that too. If you know longtime people in the community, we want to talk to them, you know, see what they recall. I think you got one more.
Okay. Just getting back to the book, The Sum of Us, I feel like haven't really represented it very well, because what the hopefulness of the book and what makes it possible to read it and not just weep, although there are moments that are definitely tear-provoking, is that she talks about what happens when people who are different from each other, race, class, education, milieu, come together, and she calls it the dividend of solidarity. And there are a lot of communities, Montclair included, where the dividend of solidarity is available. And it's something that we can strengthen together. And that's part of what this program is hopefully going to do.
Hi, I'm Kate Haller, and a relative newcomer, only in Montclair 31 years. And I love it. I love Montclair. And you mentioned sort of in passing that when the discussion was happening about whether to have one pool or 3 pools, that some members of the African American community supported having 3 pools because they wanted to have a pool close to where their kids were. I just wanted to share my experience. I used to live up just by Watchung Avenue, and Mountainside Pool was where I went. And then about 10 years ago, I moved, and now I'm south of Bloomfield Avenue. And it's like, wow, Nishawane Pool, it's less than a mile from me. I go there all the time. I never go to Mountainside anymore. So I feel that having a place like that close by is really valuable. And the difference between that and the magnet schools is with the magnet schools, the town is obliged to provide transportation, but not so with public pools. So I just wanted to ask, was there a division within the African American community, some people wanting just one pool so it would be sure to be integrated, and some people wanted more pools because it was important to have a pool close to where they live because there was no transportation?
I don't think that, or at least I don't recall, that there was a lot of conversation about having, one pool versus 3 pools. For me, and at that time, and as I said, I was probably around 20 years old or so, and I was just starting a family. I was looking for a better swimming experience than was offered with the 3 smaller pools. And Ariel mentioned that, I did make a comment earlier about diving, and that's what, people in their late teens, early 20s are more interested in that as opposed to, sitting on a towel or, and sunbathing, So for me, at that time, I was really, advocating for a larger pool rather than the 3 smaller pools.
My name is Robin Jackson. I just wanted to know, how did the pools wind up integrating after a while? How did they get the people to get together to integrate so they could be all together as one instead of separation over the years, over time? Does that make sense? The question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense.
Okay.
And there are still 3 pools in Montclair. It's just that the demographics have changed, and you have more people, living in areas where they didn't live before. So now that's really the main catalyst for the integration that's occurred. But I don't think that. Well, I know that there was never a conversation about limiting who could use which pool.
And if I'm not mistaken now, that it's open to people outside of Montclair now. So, I drove past Nishawayne School and it's loaded. And it should be. It should be right now with the temperature the way it is. And we're grateful that it is that way.
Hi, I'm Ken Bannerman. I was quite shocked when you talked about the Montclair Y being segregated. I was wondering if you could elaborate some of the specific questions I have. Was this a national policy? Was it a local policy? Was the integration just evolved, or was it a result of specific actions?
Okay. Well, when I was coming up in town, the YMCA down where the Bullock School is located now, that was the colored Y. And that's where African Americans went to swim. Yes. And the Park Street Y was the Y, I don't remember exactly what transpired at the Park Street Y, because I didn't go there. But down at the Washington Street Y, and I'm not sure exactly why they had this policy, but the boys, we had to swim nude. I'm serious. And anybody, if you went to the Washington Street Y, you had to swim nude. Boys did. The girls, they got to wear bathing suits. But it was, it was kind of crazy. And I mean, every once in a while they'd have co-ed swims. And no, well, I mean, if you went to a co-ed swim, you were supposed to take trunks. But I remember a couple of guys who came and dove into the pool, and as their eyes got this big as they were about to hit the water, because they realized they were in the wrong place.
Just also on the YWCA history, so nationally, yes, YWCAs had deliberate segregation of YWs and YMCAs. You don't actually see a mandate for integration of those spaces until you start to hit the 1950s. And then there's still, then again, that stigma, welcomeness and not welcomeness, right, in different spaces. So what's interesting about Montclair is Montclair had 2 YMCAs. You had the white branch and then you had the color branch. Montclair's YWCA for women had no white branch. It was only a colored women's YWCA, which actually women were really proud of, and that they established this to create a space. I know your family was involved in that YWCA as well. Roger, you can see, was it your great-grandmother or grandmother is pictures in, so if you actually come to the Crane House and historic YWCA on Orange Road, you can learn all about Montclair's YWCA history. We're actually now a part of the New Jersey Black Heritage Trail. And you can learn more about that. You can hear the voices of the women of the Y, where there was a documentary completed, and see really amazing photographs. Why, and I probably know you're about to go, so I promise my last tidbit is, so why any YMCA or YWCA segregated became rising in popularity in the later part of the 19th century in the United States, and then you start to see them pop up. But the protocol was you were supposed to have your white branch first, and then if there was a community need, you'd have a colored branch. So Montclair also had a yearly unique model that women really established and took it on themselves to say, well, we need this for Black women in the community, so we're going to do it. So it's a really great story. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lori, and I am actually very new to Montclair. We moved here in just May, and every day we're learning new things and really trying to get deeper into the history of the community and the people here, which have been really wonderful and very welcoming. And so I have two questions. My first question, which is actually Chanel's question, is what remnants of historical racism are we still paying for today or dealing with today when we think about the fact that we still have 3 pools to maintain as compared to the example another woman gave earlier about like the one beautiful pool in Princeton. So where are there other things that are continuing to kind of linger and actually cost us more because we're maintaining those remnants of racism? And then the second question I have, again, being new and learning about even just the makeup and demographics and learning about, okay, there's an upper Montclair and then there's, I don't know, the rest of Montclair. And I just wonder, and I've like driven down Upper Mountain Road and I'm kind of like, oh. And I just wonder right now in 2026, the Upper Montclair community, I have to imagine that they are either very wealthy or very, whatever their history is that have allowed them to maintain those accommodations. What is that dynamic like now in Montclair between the Upper Montclair society and the rest of Montclair? Are there things we need to know or be concerned about, or places we shouldn't go, or things we shouldn't do? Or, yeah, loaded question, but.
Well, one of the things that I did during my tenure as the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs, I would not allow my staff to send mail to Upper Montclair. I told them, I said, it's all one town, it's Montclair, and it's a separate zip code, so put the 07043 if it's gone north of Watchung Avenue. But, and I was very adamant about that. And that was something that was a personal pet peeve of mine. So I can't really relate a lot of, what other people are, what their mentality is in regards to that. But as I said, no, we couldn't send it. And everybody on my staff was very compliant and understood that it was one town, and just because we had separate zip codes didn't mean that anybody was entitled to any more or any less.
At one point, Montclair was the 7th wealthiest community in the United States. If you take a look at, some, not just the houses on Upper Mountain Avenue, but the estate section, if you look like South Mountain in that area, like in there, all of the bigwigs, they wanted to live in Montclair so they could look over in New York and see their businesses in New York. And if you look in the History Center and look at some of the names, and some of the people that went to Montclair High School back in the day, very, very, some famous people back then. Today, first of all, welcome in the community. And it's difficult to live here today because it's not affordable for a lot of people today, unfortunately. We were just talking to Lonnie and I, a lady out in the front that she lives on Claremont Avenue. Next to her, someone bought a house there for $700,000 and probably put another $500,000 in it, having it renovated. And now she's charging $3,900 for a 2-room apartment. So that's where we are now. I mean, when we grew up, we didn't even know a lot of wealthy people. You know, you got to the high school, basically everybody was the same, you know, not to the extent that it is right now. And one other thing I want to say is that one of the things that brought everybody together was sports. Once you got to the high school, you know, teamwork was very important, and that had gone on for decades. So we came on like with that, you know, and kind of blended in, and you all played together for Montclair High School, and we were good too. You know, we did well, and Montclair High School still does well. You know, unfortunately, there's some issues now with the Board of Education, and I see that they're working on those and trying to straighten those things out. I'm glad that they got freshman sports back again, because to me, sports is important because it teaches young people about teamwork and working together.
There's time. I brought some fun facts on the demographics of 07042 and 07043 today because we figured that might come up. So I'm relying on Google here and census data, so forgive me. So if you're interested, and I'm going to read from my paper, 07042 has about 27,000 of Montclair's residents in it. 07043 has about 12,500. So on the 07042 side, your demographic breakup says about 51% white, 25% black, 6% Asian, and 14% two or more races. And 07043 is substantially still less diverse, 75% white, 10% two or more races, 6% Hispanic, 5% black, 4% Asian, approximately. And also the median household incomes for each are likely what you would expect. And it's, again, interesting when you look at like the 1930s redlining demographic, it's really not that far from what it was. And the same conversations still come up today where, and I was actually just looking at this yesterday, you look at where these home and loan mortgage companies are slating, well, these are places we should redevelop. Well, we all know redevelop means communities get kicked out. And that's still a conversation today in Montclair, you know? So it's just really, when you look at it, and actually I can't answer the question that was originally posed. I posed it to the people in the community. What do you think about the 07042 or 07043? I can't answer it for you, yeah.
And what about the second part of that question of remnants? Of remnants of segregation compared to like the pool, how we're still paying for it now, anything that's happening now that.
You mean financial remnants or just generally, like what?
It could be both.
Mhm.
I think where you see investment in communities, the neighborhoods still have the same type of segregation plan that I would, referring back to that redlining piece again. Roger and Lonnie, you've lived here your whole lives. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I haven't lived here, I guess, in 20 years now. So I don't have a lot of opportunity to observe the current trends in town, other than the fact that I can't drive around here anymore because there's stop signs where there were none. And that just drives me crazy. But I'm not trying to avoid your question, but I don't see a lot of what currently going on here now. I live in Atlantic City. I've been living down there full-time for the last 10, 15 years. So I made the drive up this morning, though.
Well, if you take a look at, for instance, the Fourth Ward, all right, take a look at Mission Street and some of those houses that are there right now. Those are $1 million houses on Mission Street. That wasn't like that when we grew up. That was a predominantly blue-collar African-American area. So when you think about like what has changed, almost the whole town is changed. There is very few people, as Lonnie indicated, that grew up with us that still live in Montclair, because it's not affordable anymore, especially if you're, God help you, if you're a senior, and trying to hold on, that it is very, very, very difficult. So if you talk about what's left from that, I would say that most of the people from back in the day are gone. They're gone, but the trends as far as what direction this town is going like much more wealthy. You have to have, either a two-family income to live here, or you got to be making like, a good amount of money, to live in Montclair today. And I know that the council is going to be working on the master plan. That's coming up sometime soon too. So that's going to be interesting. Thank you. And just one other thing that you mentioned earlier: get involved. If you live in your community, get involved. Do something. Get on one of the boards. Call up at your council people. Find out if you want to be a district leader. Today, it's important to get involved in your community so you can have a say, and make sure you teach your children and your grandchildren the same thing.
Yeah, I just need to ask you, because you said we can contact you if we have anything about education, how to contact you. Thank you so much.
If you want to connect with the Montclair History Center, at the checkout table, there's pamphlets on us, or just go to montclairhistory.org. And that's our website, and you can do that. Yep. Thank you.
So, everybody, what a great program. You were all so fantastic.